we saw the band in the Casbah, which was fantastic gig, and I always loved the Casbah. And the barmen in the Casbah, if you pogoed, all the bottles started flying off the walls and stuff. And they had these wet towels, and all the kids instinctively knew when to duck on her. And I kept getting wet towels in the face. And I asked, where's the toilet? And they said, well, you can have that wall there or that wall. It was just it was fantastic because I really loved it.
Once we got a regular thing in the Casbah, to try and keep it interesting for us, we'd try and do a new song every week. And it was easier to try and write a song than doing a cover version, because you have to work out, well, for me anyway, I had never a great ear and stuff, working out chords and that sort of thing. So it was easier to try and, put a few chords together. Which made it easier for me.
I saw the band on a number of occasions. I saw them once in the Casbah when, when I was probably the oldest person in the audience. I come up from Dublin, and a friend, actually the son of a friend, actually insisted that I come because I was writing about music, insisted that I come and see them in the Casbah, and I did, sort of. And one of the things about great bands is that you know a great band when you hear it. You don't have to analyse it, sort of, and within 10 bars the first time you heard them live, gosh, this is something special. And it's in the Casbah, in this sort of overground dungeon.
Casbah, for the purposes of history, was actually a porta cabin that you'll see on any building site anywhere in the world. So we're not talking about some sort of grandiose venue here. That had actually been placed over a hole in the ground where the previous establishment had been bombed to oblivion.
Alright, Casbah, 24th of February 1977, we got £20. We've definitely made a name for ourselves. It was fucking brilliant. For our sake, it had to be brilliant. Sound was fair all round. Fair? I don't think we would have been looked on as a brilliant new group if Billy hadn't demolished the drums at the end of TVI. He just went mad along with me and John, getting all the feedback we could. We're invited back in 2 weeks' time, and if that goes well, we'll be playing there regularly. Like I said, this is the year of the Undertones. Classic stuff.
I've always liked the instrumentals anyway. A twangy guitar is still hard to beat, I think.
That's right, you're big
every time I walk on the street.
But that's good.
You want to change up?
I'll make a note of it.
You have to remember, in 1978, it wasn't that easy to make a record. Certainly very few people were doing it in Derry, and we knew that Terry Hooley in Belfast was putting out these records. So we managed to get a tape to Terry Hooley.
I had listened to it for 2 weeks non-stop, every night. And I was, at that time in the 70s, there was loads of people used to come round to our house. And every night I played it to them, and they all hated it. And then one night a guy called Ricky Flanagan, who made poaching at the time, we were drinking his poaching, and at about 3 o'clock in the morning he said to me, I understand what you're on about, I think this band are good. So I had somebody else, and I wanted to do the Undertones. But there was a few other bands at the time that I wanted to do, and I was going to meet one band and to tell them that I was going to do them, because we didn't have much money. And I met Bernie McInerney in the shop, and he was going back to Derry, and he told me that the Undertones were going to break up if I didn't sign them up and stuff. And I said to him, I'll tell you when I get across the road. And when I got across the road, I said to Mac, tell him we're on the label.
What a lovely sound. I mean, far from it being, an angry, aggressive sound, it's actually very sweet and beautiful, and just because of the type of people they were and what they were trying to say and so on. When you hear at the opening of T-Days Kicks, when you hear John and Damien and Mickey on the bass and Billy Doherty sort of on the drums, sort of the way those sounds intermesh, the first thing that strikes me about it is just, how beautiful it is. I mean, how sweet the sound is. And then when you factor in, I mean, Fergal's shimmering voice floating through the instruments, you know, it's a gorgeous noise. And I think that's significant, really. You know, this was a band that sounded beautiful, you know, coming from an ugly place. You know, and while many people would, in conventional terms, see sort of that, sort of the sweetness and the beauty of their music as something soft and mainstream, that was far from mainstream in the Bogside in 1977 and 1978.
My memories of the earlier days of the Undertones before we got signed, and even when we did get signed, it was bedlam. There was constant fights every weekend. Like, we'd pack up our gear and come out of the Casbah, and there's always boys waiting to punch your brains out. And even going home, we used to run up William Street because there's always guys there waiting to hit you a slap. I don't know why.
Was it dangerous to kind of raise your head metaphorically above the parapet, to do anything really that attracted attention to yourself?
We did come on for a fair bit of stick, you know, even before we were on top of Pops, and then afterwards, you know.
But stick for what, though?
Well, a lot of it stems from Fergal, actually. A lot of people hated Fergal because he was an exhibitionist. Because we always get abuse in the street, right? But Fergal was the only one who gave him abuse back. He wasn't afraid. We were kind of cowards. We just
which I would have been with you.
We were going down to get a newspaper and cigarettes, and this kid ran across the road to spit on Fergal. And it really freaked me out. Well, first of all, I thought he was going to shoot us or something, and it really freaked me out. And I just I never really got over that, because in Belfast, people couldn't be born to walk across the road and spit on you. But it was just like, here was a band who had even got a record contract, and this guy was coming over to spit on him and tell him they were rubbish. And I really freaked. I mean, to this day, it still really disturbs me that people could do that.
I knew that I personally was uncomfortable there. I obviously didn't set out, certainly I don't think at any time going, oh, okay, fantastic, I've got a bit of a sort of foothold into a band here, music is now going to be my path out of here. It simply could not have been that developed a plan and that developed a strategy, because the reality and the chances of somebody in our position at that time pulling it off were just so remote, it was just not worth thinking about.
The Undertones attracted a lot of resentment. They attracted a lot of appreciation from their immediate friends and from people who just liked their music, and there were other people thinking like them, but they also were surrounded by suspicion and even hostility, because they were, I think, perceived as a group of young people who were not conforming to what was expected and what was imposed upon them, almost as a sort of communal duty, to be, part of the Bogside and the Bogside struggle, and to simply express that. So it must have been very difficult for them. And although they expressed it very casually and did express it very casually, it took away, I suppose, a bit of courage and sort of a steadiness of purpose on their part, actually, to do what they did and to stick with it in the face sort of quite a lot of hostility and even contempt.
I remember like it was yesterday. I had been promising that I would go see the Searchers, and I went with Paul McNally, who worked for me, and all of a sudden this record comes on, Teenage Kicks, and it like, I mean, it was so amazing, the record, that I just said, oh, pull over, pull over.